Thank you, Sean.
All right, so we'll call to order the December 1st meeting of the Board of Appeals on the comprehensive permit application for 582 Blue Hill Avenue. My name is Jeffrey Mullen, and with me are Frank O'Brien and Giselle Joffer, members of the board, assisted by Judy Barrett from the Barrett Planning Group, and Tim Zawinski, the Milton's town planner, and Beverly Sutton, assistant to the board. So let me catch people up. This is the third meeting we've had on the deliberation of this decision for the hearing that we previously closed. To remind people, we received an initial draft, commented on that. Ms. Barrett has edited and turned it back to the board, and the board has provided comments on that. She has been assisted in doing this by members of the town. Mr. Zawinski has coordinated several comments from the building, primarily the building inspector and the DPW director, and perhaps others. So I think tonight, it would be, unless the members object, I think it would make sense for Ms. Barrett to advise us kind of where she is with the draft, and if we could put the draft on the screen, whatever version, Judy, you think is appropriate. We can walk through it and take people's comments, and then we can assess where we are and how to move forward.
Okay.
Members? Okay, Ms. Barrett.
Yes, sir. Just looking for the correct copy of the decision so I don't create a lot of confusion. I just about got it here. Here we go. Can you all see that? Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, So what I've opened up here is the version that Jeff provided comments on, which were all very helpful. You know, Jeff, I tried so hard to get those dates straight on the public hearing dates, and I just finally gave up. So a lot of this procedural history is just kind of, it's the what happened. It's the board had the hearing. It's the board got comments. It's the board hired peer review consultants. It's sort of just some basic factoids about the project as it was originally proposed.
Judy, would you mind if, as you scroll through this, if we ask questions or just note comments?
Of course, absolutely.
So on page 2 on item 4,
Yes.
Tim, is it lot 13A on assessors map B?
What the application says.
Yeah, I know that's what I knew that, but I didn't independently verify it. That's all. So
I'll look that up right now. If you give me just a minute, I'll try.
Yeah. Go ahead. We can go ahead. You can just let us know. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to strike the yellow language or the applicant?
Yeah, I'm going to take care of that. That was Judy's brain was on another case. So
You could write, you could read the applicant's civil engineering consultant, you could say, or you could just strike is, whatever, you know.
I'll add it. I just didn't
Okay.
get to it yet, Jeff. It's
I also noticed in that particular one that I want to make sure that if we're going to list all of the consultants employed by the applicant, we should list all of them. And I think the landscape architect is missing from this list.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'll have to get that information.
He has a pretty good list on the initial application.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, I mean, I'll clean this up, obviously. I'm not going to try to wordsmith this right now, but I just,
No, Judy, we've got this notion that this project is the original project, which was the project that was the subject of the original application.
that's
And then
correct.
the revised project. You know, I wrote in here, the original project and the revised project are sometimes referred to in this decision where the context permits as the project, because it really doesn't matter. So for example, in paragraph 6, I didn't revise project to revise project, but I just want to be, those are all defined terms, that's all.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Sure, exactly. That's
Okay.
helpful. Thank you. That's always a struggle, you know, because so many of these change.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's a good idea to call out the fact that there was an original project and that it was revised, I mean, fairly significantly on 2 occasions. I mean, I think that's an important part of the record.
Yes, that's fine. Let me just get this out of here. Okay. Let's see, reviewers work for the board, not the town. The peer review consultants work for you.
Yeah.
They're not
Okay.
hired by the town. They're engaged by the board.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure how in the weeds you want to get with some of these edits. A lot of them are helpful corrections, but
You maybe just keep scrolling, and when the board has an issue, it will raise it.
that's
Sure.
fine. That's what you like me to do.
Yeah.
I have a-
Paragraph,
Pardon me?
paragraph 10.
Yes.
Can I have something before that, if that's
Of
okay,
course.
Frank?
Yes.
In 9C, where it
Yes.
says, although admittedly not listed on the National Register of Historic Places are included as of the date of the application. Is that because, and I think I do recollect this, that it is now listed?
It may now be listed, but that wouldn't be germane to the date of the application. What matters is what was in place the date they applied.
Right. And I'm just wondering if a way to make that point would be, well, first of all, am I right that it's now listed?
I
My
believe
understanding that it was
think it's
not
listed.
at the time, but it
I don't
is
think
now.
I don't think it's listed on the National Register. I think it's in the town's resource inventory on Macris. Am I right about that, Tim? I don't know. You may have.
Tim's hand is up. He might know.
So I went to go grab the assessor's book while this issue came up. So you want me to look up and see when it was, I'll go into Macris and look and see when it was listed or registered or submitted?
It's not on the National Register. It may be on Macris.
All right, you want me to go in and confirm that?
You sure? I
Wait,
mean,
well,
if you want.
I would like you to, please, because I think, I mean, while I appreciate that sort of the review was done at the point of the application, if it's now listed, I think that should be reflected.
Okay, I'll kind of see if I can grab that information. To go back to the parcel ID, Judy, do you mind scrolling back up to that?
So Giselle, the only thing I would say, this is all up to you guys. I mean, I don't have any skin in this game, but I don't see where any of that is part of the board's record. The only thing that I saw in the record was that the applicant's own application says that it wasn't a historic listed property. So unless the board actually has testimony about, you know, this is now on the National Register and somehow that affected, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, that's exactly precisely what I believe I recollect, that at some point it was actually added to some historical register during the course of the proceedings.
okay.
So on the parcel ID, we may need to kind of wordsmith this a little bit because the format that we use is not quite what this is. So it is assessor's map B, and it is 8A, parcels 13 and 13A. So it's map B, block 8A. No, block, BLOCK, sorry. And then it would be parcel 13 and 13A.
Two parcels?
Two parcels. I don't know if you want to just get rid of the slash and put an and. I don't know if it makes a difference. And what I can also do in the meantime is to the extent that there was oral testimony, I don't remember. I can look through the comment letters and see if there's a record of reference to that, the house being listed, if
I
If you
can
want me to do that.
also, I'm not gonna do it now because I'm on Zoom, but I have, I have otter notes on almost all these meetings, so I could check the otter notes as well.
let me see if we've got something in writing and I can confirm that.
That might be.
We're checking Macris, is that what's going on right now?
I guess.
I mean, I'm also going through some of the town comment letters to see if, is this something that you can go back to?
Good.
I can have a report back in a few minutes.
We could. Paragraph 10. Frank,
Thank you. So the last full sentence of that particular paragraph, which references the preliminary construction management plan. So what I was able to find on the town's website in terms of the record is a letter dated July 8th, 2021, which is entitled Preliminary Construction Management and Traffic Plan. And this particular preliminary construction management and traffic plan was marked throughout as owner draft. I just want to confirm that that is the document that you're referring to.
I think so.
I'm not gonna be able to open all the files on my computer and be on screen share with you, so let me open my other laptop here and I'll try to find it.
I think that's it.
Everything on the website and everything in my records to write this decision, so I'm not making it up, but that must be it, Frank, because
Okay, I know we're being persnickety here. It's just just to be correct, and it should be preliminary construction management and traffic plan. And I would prefer it to be dated so that we refer to a specific document.
isn't that going to be in the exhibit anyway? I haven't listed all the final submittals in the exhibit. So, I mean, I'm happy to add it here. I'm just saying that I think everything is already there.
Okay, well, just if it's already there and there's no confusion about what document that we're referring to, I
Okay.
just want to make sure that that's my point for raising it. I just don't.
Understood.
There are so many documents. I want to make sure that when we're referring to one specifically, that we're referring to the one that we mean to refer to.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just can't answer your question right now.
No problem.
Okay, shall I keep going or what?
Please, yeah, please, Judy.
This whole section is, I hate to say it, it's basically boilerplate.
But is it the same language that was in the Ice House
Yes,
decision?
it is. Yes, it is.
Can you confirm that the point being made, look at 17, that numbering's got to be fixed. It should be 17A, right?
Yeah, they sometimes just didn't catch up.
Yeah. Is the minimum determined as of the date of the board's receipt of the application? Is that
Yes.
what?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right in the regs.
Okay.
Do you want me to keep going, Jeff?
Please, yeah, yeah.
So stylistically, these changes are fine. I try to avoid where I can some of these acronyms, but I don't care.
Well, some of them have been defined earlier in the decision, you know?
Yeah, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. I'm okay with this. So, so the jurisdictional findings are what they are. Now we get to the factual findings. I guess I'll just keep scrolling through here unless there's something you want to see.
Let's talk about A. Oh, yeah. You see what I'm saying there?
Well, I do. I mean, obviously, if they're applying for a subsequent approval, a building permit or something, I mean, they're gonna have to comply with whatever is in effect when those other permits are sought.
Right. They're either subject to it or they're not. So I didn't want to limit it. And I thought that that had the potential to limit it. So I struck that language. That's
Sure.
all.
That's fine.
That applicable laws is an important definition in this decision.
Yeah.
I see I left out a quotation there in that each and applicable law should be quote, close paren.
Okay.
Yeah, you can keep going.
Just looking at stuff here. All right.
So the town is, Tim, I think this is an important issue for you. The town is a body politic, but sometimes we refer to the town as if it's a person. So we've built into this a statement as to what the town is when we refer to it that way. And we're saying it's the building inspector unless indicated otherwise as the main implementing entity. We're also delegating to him to authority of the board to the extent that we can or that the law permits. So I just want to pay attention to the use of the word town in this decision. What I'm trying to avoid, and I think the members share this, is we're not an executive body. We don't have the ability to take an action unless we reconvene in a public forum. So
Right.
at least as the chair, I don't want to have to reconvene to make decisions or to take actions unless they're specifically required or inconsistent with this comprehensive permit in some way. I'd much rather delegate to either you or the building inspector the authority to implement this permit, this comprehensive permit, and do it that way. So when I was looking at this, that's what I was mindful of. And I dropped your name quite a bit, Tim.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any, I agree that that staff should be the hands of the board in kind of dealing with stuff. I don't know if I have any advice as to how to kind of frame that or phrase that, but I do think that you know, the routine kind of decisions and submissions and everything, the
Yeah.
board doesn't necessarily need to be touching them. So
Yeah, you can see it in here. And then, it's the kind of thing where I'd like the building inspector to be specifically aware of that. And, to the extent it really doesn't relate to the building code per se, I think that might be more appropriate to be you. And to the extent it's related to the infrastructure, we're really relying on the DPW director. That's what emerges in this decision.
yeah, and I think, we had reviewed the conditions specifically. We hadn't reviewed section A, but when I went through this with the building commissioner, he very specifically kind of pointed out all of the instances where, this isn't my role, this is planning's role, this is DPW's role. We've also got Chase Berkeley from DPW looking at those conditions just to kind of confirm. We kind of backed into responsibilities by just kind of going through what wasn't in Joe's wheelhouse, which I think is probably fine. But so at least as when we go through the conditions, that input should already be in there because we've gotten Joe's comments in prior to the last hearing. So he's aware of that and he's kind of taken a look at that and is very much interested in the board not having to make executive decisions.
Okay. I added the language in A9 and I had there's a few typos in there. Sorry about that. Because I just wanted it to be clear that you do have the right to do that, but obviously we're not creating law here. Well, if they have the ability to charge them back to the applicant, then we're stating that. So it was kind of implied, but I just wanted it to be specifically stated.
I just want to go back and correct something just for my own sake here. Just a minute. Frank, where was that paragraph where the construction management plan was referred?
Number 10.
I got it. It's pretty bad when you have to use two computers just to get through a meeting with one board.
We can go back to the Macris issue when you all are ready.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Does it have the date of listing on the Macris? I know that they list the properties, but I don't remember that they actually list the dates. Do they?
It doesn't, and I actually kind of have a quick, Judy, you may have a little bit more knowledge about this. So just to kind of, to Giselle's issue about, is this part of a record? I do have a letter from the Historical Commission dated January 19th, 2021 that references the, where did it go? I already lost the reference, but it does reference that it's listed in the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Inventory System. And as such, it's subject to the terms of CMR 70 and 71. So there is.
What's the date of the letter?
The date of the letter is January 19th, 2021.
Okay, thank you.
So there is reference to the listing. In Macris, it doesn't say that like, oh, this was inventoried on this date.
Right.
And kind of the distinction between, I think, the distinction between National Register and State Register is very clear. But the difference between simply being inventoried and being on the State Register is not super clear to me. This doesn't indicate that it's on the State Register, but there is an inventory form for it. So to the extent that any of that matters for this decision, I don't know, but it is in the inventory and we do have a record in the record of that fact being referenced. That's all I've got.
I think it needs to be accurate with respect to the status of the property. If we're going to include this reference, we need to be correct. So it doesn't need to be corrected now, but it needs to be corrected before we finalize it. But Ms. Joffer, this is your issue.
Yeah, my impression as the evidence was coming in was that I sort of, to Judy's point in the papers, noted that the applicant highlighted, right, that it wasn't listed in the historical record in the application.
Right.
And then when that came up during the course of evidence, the way that I received it, and this may not be accurate, was that it was then later added, right? I didn't know if it was a correction, but I received it at the time as like, oh, now it's on there. But
that is my understanding, because I even got a call from Allison in the planning department asking me about this after the application had been filed. So that's my understanding, but I don't know when it was listed.
right. So my original thought was that, we would just put, it was not listed as of the date of the application, but is now listed, because I think that's of interest and material.
Well, we need to be very careful because it's not on the National Register.
Well, if accurate, yeah, whatever is accurate and pertinent.
All right, so that's a piece of homework. We should also reference macros specifically, since
Yes.
people know what that is.
Right.
And then we need to determine the date that it went on macros.
Thank you for looking that up, Tim, and thank you, Judy.
Yeah, I'm gonna do my best on that. Maybe a little bit of detective work, but we'll figure that out.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I'm now going back to the conditions. Sorry, I skipped over some here. So we're now into the, I guess we looked at the A's already and nobody had any more to say about it, as I recall. Am I right?
B1,
What?
B1.
E1? Thank you.
Going backward.
B is in Bravo, 1.
B, I'm sorry.
B is in Barrett.
Yes, sir.
What is the A? Can we just, what is the last A there?
What?
What's the what's,
A13.
oh, okay, so this is where we delegate to the building inspector. People comfortable with that?
Yeah.
So I feel like, and I want the building inspector to know this, that while we're delegating this to him, we're not asking him to do our job. So he can ask guidance of us, we can meet as needed. We're just trying to limit the administrative burden on everybody to administer this permit. And I thought this paragraph did that. And then Bev, I think it's important that the board retain a comprehensive file for the comprehensive permit. And I know that you share an office with the building inspector. So at some point, while we don't need to get copies of all of these things and just create an administrative burden, we do want to have one file where everything that goes with 582's comprehensive permit is in one place. So I'll leave that to you folks, but that was why I added that second sentence there, you know? I mean, someday in the future, people are going to ask to assemble the record, and it would be a convenient place to do that, since it feels to me like it's either all gone through the board or will all go through the building inspector.
All right. Ready to talk about B1?
Yeah.
Okay. And this goes to the little note that Jeff wrote in here in terms of the word fully.
Oh, yeah, and
Um,
that can just go.
Well, let me just, so a little bit of my background is at one point I served on the board of the housing authority in the town.
Yep,
And as you know, there are certain qualifications for someone to be in a project that's managed by a public housing authority,
yes.
including income restrictions, things like that.
Yep.
Are there similar restrictions relative to the designated affordable units? For example,
Yeah.
What if an occupant of an designated affordable unit subleased that unit? Is that something that needs to be considered within this document, or is that something for the owner to deal
That
with?
is for this, that is anything to do with eligibility to occupy a unit is the jurisdiction of the subsidizing agency.
Okay. So in other words, not something that needs to be dealt with in the comprehensive permit.
No, they would actually probably tell you to strike it.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So I keep going, scrolling down then, or?
Let's just talk about B3 for a second. Tim, this sets up a situation where I know that the regulatory agreement requires an annual certification report. This requires that they also submit that report to you and include either with that report or another report, the status of compliance with the permit. So it's an annual certification as to where we are with the permit. So again, I'm not trying to create a huge administrative burden, but it feels to me like what the town is interested in is where are we with this permit at any given time? So there's a couple of key points, like when you get the building permit or a CO, we also want an update on the compliance report. So you know where we are with respect to the compliance with the conditions. Now, I didn't provide for this to end because I didn't see a place in here where we issue a certificate of completion or a certificate of compliance with respect to the comprehensive permit. I just don't know how this gets closed out, or whether this issuance of the certificate of occupancy is a closeout of the permit, or whether that's in the regulatory agreement. But you know, there ought to be a way to tie that off, at which point they've complied with the permit, or maybe it just stays open forever. I don't know.
I guess the question is, and you know, when we get through the conditions, maybe we can kind of keep this in mind. You know, the monitoring of the affordable units is perpetual, right? You know,
Yeah,
these
yeah.
are-
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, to what extent are there perpetual obligations in the conditions that are beyond, you know, design, right? Which is self-enforcing in a lot of ways. Like, are there, what else needs to be monitored? Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but I think we should, you know, I think that's the way you back into that. There's a lot of construction period stuff, obviously. But if there's anything beyond the construction period, you know, that would be, you ID that, and then you kind of figure out, okay, what's the, is there a, you know, do you tie it to a number of years? Do you tie it to an event?
Yeah. Well, how does it usually work? I mean, this must be an issue because there's so many recorded documents. I think about it in a redevelopment concept, Tim, where you've got a land disposition agreement and then that calls for certificate of compliance. So that you know where you are at that point. Notwithstanding that fact, there are certain covenants that go well beyond the period of the LDA, you know? And this is kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll ask Judy, and you, Judy, you have a puzzled look on your face. So is there any kind of?
I have never heard of this.
Yeah, I mean, back in my, and you know, there's urban renewal components to this. I mean, back in my BPDA days, you know, you'd have, you know, all sorts of crazy, you know, mitigation and community benefit kind of aspects to an approval. And, you know, the certification of compliance was, you know, you wouldn't sign off on it was a way to kind of keep track of all that stuff and make sure that it was, you know, continually monitored. So I think that it is, to the extent that there are kind of, you know, things that are conditioned that are above and beyond, you know, if we're going to be talking about the gardens, for instance, like what are the obligations around the gardens, and does that need to be, you know, on an ongoing and kind of indeterminate length period be reported on? You know, that would be something that would need to go into this compliance report. You know, the way, you know, in here in town, when we have a particularly complicated special permit or subdivision approval that has, you know, ongoing obligations, or at least, you know, extraordinary, not like crazy extraordinary, but like beyond the ordinary kind of obligations. It really is just kind of me monitoring the approval and kind of making a note to myself and to the building commissioner, like we'll have requirements that, like, you know, before the issuance of the 10th occupancy permit, you need to make a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust. And so it's just kind of marking that trigger.
Right.
You know, so I think to the extent that there are requirements or conditions like that, we'll need to track them. But off the top of my head, I can't recall what kind of conditions we have that might be like that. So Judy, it sounds like in your experience, there isn't kind of like a separate document or approval or something, which
No,
makes
no,
sense. Good.
I mean, it's the rent recertification report, you want to know that your affordable units are occupied by eligible people. And that's certainly well within the board's right to ask for that, or to make sure that something is on file with the town. That's probably your biggest compliance worry once these things are built and occupied, is are we actually going to lose units on the SHI because somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do? So that's key. But anything else about these projects in terms of, how they're being managed or something is entirely the subsidizing agency.
Well, except with respect to the built environment, which go to the local concerns, right? What I'm thinking about is knowing that the infrastructure was constructed in accordance with the plans and then tying that off. At what point do we know that? Now, somebody may say to me, well, that's when the certificate of occupancy isn't going to be issued unless that happens. If that's the answer, that's okay. But you don't tie, this doesn't feel to me like those things get tied off vis-a-vis the comprehensive permit, at least not specifically. I didn't see it in here.
Well, there's conditions in here about what has to happen at each stage of the project. So when you get to the final CO, there are things they have to submit. And unless they submit them, they don't get their final CO.
Okay, is that how it works?
Yeah,
Well, I know that's what it says, but I'm wondering is that how it works?
I have never seen it work any other way.
That's how the building department works. That's where Joe would sign off and say, everything's got to be met 100%.
Yeah.
And if it's a brand new build and and upon completion, since it's a new build, Joe will then issue a certificate of occupancy when all the T's crossed and all the I's are dotted. Nothing gets by Joe Prondak.
Well, I wouldn't suggest that something does, for the record.
No, I know.
Look, if people are satisfied that it is at that point that the majority of this comprehensive permit is deemed complied with, and that's acceptable to the applicant, I suppose that's fine. I just want to affirmatively acknowledge that, that's all.
Well, I'm not so sure. Sorry. But Jeff, I think you raise a good point. And so I looked at this language within the context of where it's located, which is in the affordability section. So I looked at in the context of, as Judy said, whether the affordable units are being dealt with appropriately. But the way that I heard you articulate your concept behind the language, you were talking about something broader than just affordability, correct?
Oh yeah. It comes up here because it's just a convenient place to note that there's this annual compliance report separate and apart with respect to the permit, separate and apart from the one that's owed under the regulatory agreement, which gives rise to the question of how long do they have to keep doing it?
Yeah, so my concern, if it's intended to be a much broader thing, then it inserts at least some ambiguity in here if it's included in the affordability, because if I'm sitting and this was a statute, I would be saying that this would only be applicable to the affordability section and nothing else.
That is all it's applicable to. They submit an annual rent compliance report. That's what they do.
Yeah, but what I'm here, yes, that's what I understand, Judy, when it comes to the affordability. But what I heard Jeff say was that and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what I heard you say is that you're also interested in continuing compliance with some of the infrastructure requirements and other things, not just affordability. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, because that goes to the local concern, right? That's what we spent 28 of the 30 hearings on. Yeah.
I think the answer to this question is going to lie in kind of a review of the conditions and kind of identifying to what extent there are conditions that are being, because the way that Bev describes the kind of the C of O and building permit process is exactly right. The permit, whether it's a comprehensive permit or a special permit or a site plan approval, is the building inspector's guide. We have a system by which, the departments that have a kind of review function over development projects, engineering, DPW, fire department, planning, we'll all get an email through our automated kind of permitting system when Joe is kind of prepared on his end to issue a certificate of occupancy, basically to check in, has this met all of planning's requirements? Has this met all of, DPW's requirements? So every building permit and every project that goes to the building department has that kind of built in.
Right.
Whether or not there needs to be an above and beyond process for this type of permit because of its complexity.
But you can't do that. It's right in the statute. You cannot impose requirements on a comprehensive permit that you don't apply to other developments.
Judy, I guess what I'm saying is, like, from an administrative perspective, how do we? I would want to catalog. Okay, what are the actual when I need to sign off for Joe when he's ready to issue a certificate of occupancy? What am I looking at? For has this met all of its obligations? And I think to the extent that there are obligations that extend beyond the certificate of occupancy, that's also what we need to know. And,
We're a special permit.
Yeah.
What if you had a special permit from the planning board where somebody had to maintain a garden? What would you do?
kind of wing it.
But what would you do? What would be the ongoing reporting requirement? Because that's how you need to think through this.
Right. So I would have to think back on an example. But again, I think I'd want to look through the conditions and see what are the things we're actually.
Let me suggest a potential way forward here. Okay, so, and let me do it by saying two things. First, in terms of the standard special permit that would be issued in the town of Milton, typically expires after a period of time, call it 4 years. At the end of 4 years, what would happen is the applicant would have to come back in, reapply for a new special permit. And at that time, there would be a look-see to see if they had been in compliance with the provisions of the original special permit. That's just kind of the way it works. I don't think that what we're suggesting here is the same procedure. What I think is being suggested here is that with all of the compliance things that need to be done here, going back to Jeff's comment about ease of assembling the record, I think what we may be heading toward is having the ability to have all the stuff be put in one place so that the record stays with the property, if you will. So if you do it in that way, you're not imposing a burden on a comprehensive permit project that is substantive, but it is a report in one place regarding the compliance. So it promotes administrative efficiency and puts everything in one place.
So let me ask a question. If the planning board grants a special permit for a project in one of your planned development districts, am I hearing you say that that special permit expires in 3 or 4 years and the applicant has to come back and go through permitting all over?
I'm going to defer to Tim on that, but I can only speak from the Board of Appeals. When we issue a special permit through the Board of Appeals, typically it has an expiration date on it.
But for what kind of purpose?
What do you mean for what kind of purpose?
Well, I mean, I'm on a Board of Appeals too. So, for something like an accessory apartment, the bylaw says you will come back and certify once a year, file an affidavit with the building department that the property's owner occupied.
Well, I think our bylaw has you can only issue a special permit on that particular case for a certain period of years, and then you have to come back and reapply. And our practice here in Milton has been anytime we issue a special permit, it expires after a certain period of years and you have to come back and reapply.
Okay, and I'm just asking for a development project where someone's investing in developing a use like this. Am I hearing you say that that permit would lapse in 3? How do they get it financed?
I would defer to Tim.
Yeah,
on that.
I can't speak for the Board of Appeals practice. I guess my question, Judy, is, then this hasn't come up. Well, so I mean, like, are we talking about like acting on an approval? So we issue a special permit and 5 years go by and they haven't built the building?
That's
You
different.
know,
That's different.
well, so exactly. I mean, we don't put, so if the planning board issues a special permit for a cluster development,
Right,
there is no expiration date.
right.
Or there isn't anything that says, you build this thing and then 5 years later, you've got to come back and reapply for your special
That's
permit.
what I'm asking.
Now, if the developer doesn't act on the special permit in a certain amount of time, that's a different
That's in the
conversation.
statute. And of course, absolutely. And the comprehensive permit's the same. It lapses in 3 years.
Okay,
So that's the same. I'm talking about somebody gets an approval to build a project. They go get it financed somehow, and they have to come back and now say, I need a special permit all over again?
But Judy,
No,
that doesn't matter. We're not talking about that in this, nobody's suggesting the comprehensive permit's going away, so I don't know why we're talking about this. That wasn't Frank's issue.
I just don't understand this. I'm
yeah, so
sorry.
what is?
Let me explain what my concern is, so I can be clear. Tim, you can't wing this, okay? We're gonna have 10 of these. Then we got 50 pages of conditions. Somebody's gonna have to track them. That's the big picture point. We're gonna have to have, I mean, we need resources to manage our 40B program. And, and I see lots of conditions here. And what I'm suggesting is the applicant, to help the town administer this permit, should be required to submit an annual compliance report. Here's where I am. My question is how long does that go on? And I think it's fair for the board to ask for this. We've asked for this in different, I can think of a Board of Appeals asking for this before, where we've had, for example, complex water systems being put in, the success of which we weren't 100% sure were gonna work. But I'm not asking, I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm not asking for this to go on forever, but I do want to know that offsite infrastructure is done. And the on-site infrastructure about which we had so many meetings is satisfied, if is compliant. If the building inspector says, I'm not going to issue the CO until I know that that's done, and everybody's happy that that's just going to be evidence that the comprehensive permit is satisfied, I guess that's okay. I don't know, if I were the applicant, I might want something a little bit more to know that I'm done with those, but maybe not. And I'm not trying to rewrite 40B. I want to make sure that we're administering this program, which is brand new to the town.
All I can tell you is, in section C, we lay out at each step of the process what the applicant has to do to be able to pass go and collect $200.
Right.
And these are standard conditions. And this is the way it's done. Before I can get a CO, I have to do X, Y, and Z. And typically what a town does, Jeff, is these conditions all get thrown into a checklist.
I don't hear that. I don't hear that here,
Well, that's an administrative thing.
which is important.
Okay, but doesn't need to be in the permit. I'm talking about an administrative procedure that's handled by the town. The town takes the conditions, dumps them into a checklist, and now the building inspector and Tim and everybody, they don't have to do that, but it's typically what they do to be able to track all the conditions. They just dump them into a checklist. And so the building inspector knows, I cannot give you your CO until you've done X, Y, and Z. If you haven't done those things, you're not getting your CO. That's just the way it's done.
So I think the way to look at this is to when we get into the conditions, confirm that it says prior to issuance of building permit, you're going to do X, and prior to issuance of certificate, you're going to do Y. Just so we know at the outset that there's no project until, to Jeff's point, the offsite infrastructure gets done.
Absolutely, of course.
I think the second step is to evaluate if there are other conditions that are kind of outside of that timeline or time frame where the C of O is kind of the project's done, right, and it gets occupied and it gets rented and whatever. If there are other ongoing conditions, what are they, and how do they get monitored and reported
like
on?
snow removal? I mean, I don't mean to be facetious, but there's stuff in here that of course goes on. I mean, you're saying things like the town will never own the access road as a public way. That there's a snow management plan and you have to follow that. I mean, at what point is this like any other development?
Well, I mean, the board's got to decide if the town wants to,
I'm completely fine with the permit not being, being left open. That's fine. The town can enforce the permit to the extent that it deems it to be necessary. And there are obligations here that go on beyond the CO.
Mhm. As I'm sure there are for any special permit project. I mean, Tim, I'm just trying to use an example here that is sort of similar. For the projects that have been permitted in the plan development districts, what are you getting every year from them? Nothing. But they have ongoing responsibilities under their special permit, right? They have to remove the snow if the parking lot isn't big enough. I mean, they have
Right.
stuff they have to do. So I
Right.
don't understand. That's why I'm confused, because I think the town already has systems in place to say, these are things you have to do to comply with this permit.
I didn't hear that, Judy. I heard the opposite. If there is a system, I feel good about that. I didn't hear that.
I'm saying that this would not be any different from those cases. Because if there's a special permit for a project in a planned development district, and it says, among other things, thou shalt have a snow management plan. But the applicant isn't having to come back into the planning department every year to say, I've complied with this. That's parallel to this. These are conditions that go on there in your permit. You have to comply with them. If you don't, there's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, typically, again, these all kind of fall into the general bucket of enforcement by the building commissioner.
That's
You know, to the extent that he's out there, you know, every time the snow falls and is seeing if the snow has been cleared, I don't know if that actually happens, but ultimately, if there is an issue or a complaint or an observation of a violation, you know, he's got his enforcement authority as the building commissioner. That's typical. If we want to do something more, regimented than that, I'd want to kind of get my head together with Joe and figure that out. But I guess the other question that I have, you know, of the intent of this annual compliance report, prior to, in the period between the permit being issued and the C of O being issued, you know, what is the board interested in seeing in that in terms of progress, for instance, of, okay, you know, we've got the foundation in and we've done this and whatever, or, you know, what is the content of that, or is it just kind of pegged to the conditions that are already there?
That's all.
Okay.
So how are we going to leave B3? Are you saying, Judy, that that's not reasonable and the board can't require it?
I've just never seen it. In all the years I've done this, I've never seen this. I've never seen it in any comprehensive permit.
Yeah. Well, the town's going to have to think about whether or not that's something that it would like to see, given the extent of the 40Bs it's up against with respect to compliance with these comprehensive permits. Seem to me to be eminently reasonable. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Does not feel like a huge burden.
I don't know why this didn't come up in the Ice House hearing. I've just never heard this. That's part of why I'm so thrown. Like, I don't know where this is coming from.
From me.
I understand, Jeff. I know it's coming from you. I'm saying I've never heard this from any board or town or anything I've ever worked with. So,
Okay.
Well, I got to tell you, I have to agree with Jeff here in that, given the number of 40Bs that we're going, but just given the number of developments in the town per se, it gives me great concern when I hear phrases such as winging it, and the experience of sitting on the Board of Appeals and seeing, granted, we do not have the staff, nor should we have staff out there all the time, out with a stopwatch and a ruler measuring to see if the 6 inches of snow was removed within an hour. No, that's not what we're talking about, but there should be some sort of comprehensive, systematic plan or process or procedure for the town to have to keep track of compliance with an extensive list of conditions, whether it's a 40B or non-40B. And maybe it's about time the town wrapped its arms around that issue.
Mhm.
So let me look, I'm being a little fresh and a little flip when I say winging it. We've never had, I mean, to Frank's point, I think Frank makes a good point that, and Jeff as well, that these are bigger projects than we've dealt with as a town, and there's more of them that we've dealt with as a town ever. The typical thing that we're looking at, I'll give you, there's an example of, Walcott Woods, for instance, which is a 54 unit townhouse development, via special permit from the planning board. So there are several ongoing requirements as that kind of long range phase development of that project goes on, including, contributions to the town's traffic impact mitigation fund, the contributions to the Affordable Housing Trust. There's ongoing reporting to the neighborhood that's required in that special permit. When I say winging it, what I mean is there's no system that we plug these things into. This is, I evaluate the special permit, I create a file in the file for that. Joe has his own system for issuing building permits on an ongoing basis for phase projects like that. And anytime that, I get a message from him that says, we are about to issue our 10th C of O for this project. I go back into my file and say, is there any trigger here in this special permit that says at the 10th C of O, you need to do this, and we're not going to issue the 10th C of O until you've done it. It's systematic in the sense that it works on a case-by-case basis because we have so few cases. But I think the relevance to this permit and to future permits is this is a process and a report that we would need to invent, because it's been, we have few enough of these large projects that there hasn't needed to be a regimented system to keep track of this stuff. Joe's system, by which he, reports to all the other department heads of the review function to, review the special permit and say, am I okay to issue this permit, has worked. To the extent that it will continue to work, I think is a conversation that we need to have as a staff. So I think, if the board is interested in that happening, and I think the board is right to be interested in that happening because this is, we are, emerging into uncharted territory for monitoring compliance. I think the way to go is to create some sort of a reference or recommendation or whatever. At the end of the day, me and Joe and Chase and Chief King and Chief Madden and whoever else need to all come together and figure out how we're going to do this. And I don't think we're going to do that between now and when the decision is needed to be rendered. But the directive from the board to do it, I think is probably appropriate to say, the town should develop, or we recommend that the town, or we encourage that the town develop, some type of systematic approach to monitoring and ensuring that these projects are in compliance. I think that's totally, fine. And I think, quite frankly, something that we intend to do anyway.
Yeah.
So just, I get in trouble sometimes because I run my mouth at these meetings, and I apologize, Frank, for using the term winging it. I don't want to cause alarm to people, but, again, I think inventing this process now with just me is probably not a good idea, but I think directing the town to put their heads together on this, I think is appropriate.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, the board, I don't think the board's going to direct the town to do anything. I think all we're asking for, Tim, is we're recommending collectively, let me say this, big picture, the board is concerned about the amount of resources that the town is devoting to this issue. And the board is devoting a lot of resources of its own. So please understand that. Secondly, it seems to me, and at least seems to Frank, that it's a big deal, that's going to compound itself, and you want to have a system in place. So we're encouraging you to put a system in place, but we're also, you guys have to enforce the permit. So it's up to you guys to decide. I don't think the board's going to require you to do anything. However, what I'm saying is, I thought that you would have such a system, that it's only natural to have a system, that it's a natural outgrowth of the situation that the town is in, and that an annual compliance report would be reasonable and helpful to do that. That's all. That's all this is about. And so the question for you is whether or not that should be a requirement. And we should probably table this to move it on, because I'd like to hear from the town as to whether or not you think that this is a helpful condition in the administration, not just of this permit, but the ones that will follow.
Yeah, I think we do need to have that conversation with the building commissioner, again, because the permits that he issues are smaller scale than this. And if it's his intention to continue to work through his system, we would need to kind of figure out, a way to kind of back into that.
Yeah.
If there's going to be another parallel system that we come up with, we need to kind of figure that out. So we're going to need to put our heads together on that. So, definitely, appreciate the fact that we're in uncharted territory here. I have every confidence that we'll figure it out. It's just,
so do I.
We haven't had to yet. So.
Yep. Okay.
So
Why don't we move on? We can come back to this, unless the members don't.
Yeah, I'd like to address this after
Sure.
listening for a bit. So I wonder where we land in terms of the writing is we asked for this report, or sort of whatever other report is required by the town, right? Because we're not putting an onus on the town right now. We're just saying the developer will have to comply with all of these conditions. And so we want a record of how that happens.
Mhm.
That should be useful to the town. We're also not saying sort of what form the report should take.
Correct.
So it seems like it's either a report in the form the developer chooses and or one that's required by the town. And I just don't think it should be that burdensome. And it seems to me it would be more than a record of compliance, but it would actually inspire compliance.
Correct.
Just thinking of my own life for the things that I have to certify. So I'm in favor of leaving it, but I think that we could be flexible if the town's going to end up having a system where they require something else that fulfills the same purpose. But the idea of all of us going through all of this and even all the community input into these detailed things to see it all slip away because it gets forgotten is an issue, right?
Yeah. I intended to leave it open. It can be in whatever form works for Tim.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
and I think, again, to go back to one of my original points, the extent to which this becomes, I don't want to use the term burdensome, because we'll do what we need to do to enforce and monitor the conditions. But the extent to which this goes beyond the normal process is the extent to which there are conditions that are beyond the normal submission and, completion of infrastructure in terms of the road is built, the pipes are in. That's all standard fare for how we review projects. If there are things that are either unique to this site, unique to this project, or above and beyond, what are the normal things, that's where we kind of run into, okay, how do we need to, figure out how to do this? So I think as we go through the conditions, I think kind of putting a pin in those things and I'll take a look at them a little bit more closely and see like, oh, this is something that, is kind of unique to this particular, piece of land or whatever. So that's the extent to which we would need to create, additional processes and additional reporting.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So you get back to us.
Anything on this page? I'm in moving into section C here.
I did have a date on when the house was added to the Macris inventory. It was May of 2020.
Yeah, I have it too.
Okay, so
I found it. Never mind.
that was all my homework as of yet.
Thank you.
Just a quick one. It uses the term annual compliance report. Is the annual compliance report the report that we just spent 20 minutes talking about?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So the idea is that at these points, you've got your annual report and then just going to give an update. Here's where I am with my annual report. Here's where I am with my compliance. So, again, I mean, I don't know. To me, this makes perfect sense to me, but maybe I'm a bureaucrat. I don't know. But if I were the town, I would very much appreciate having something like this that it can decide. So yeah, that is it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No problem. I think you could move on, Judy. So I think that item E probably came from Mr. Hill, which is fine. But I'm noting that all that does is, all that requires is a draft of an easement. Now, later, it's required to be completed at a later stage. So this is kind of a building on it. This is showing you're making progress. So the question, I think, for the board in E is whether or not prior to the start of any construction activities, that is even without a building permit, so things like clearing and grubbing, mobilizing, whether or not we wanted to have that easement in place. And the application, the comprehensive permit does not provide that right now. It provides it, I think, at the building permit. I think that's the next section. You know? I mean, is that the point, Judy? Is that what we're getting at here? The two stages?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's okay. I mean, it's a little what it does is it's intended, I'm assuming, to show progress. And, you know, there's some more requirements in there. But the point is when they actually begin construction activities, they may not have the right to, or the confirmed right to tap into Meeting House Lane. Okay?
Am I moving on or what?
Why don't you go on and you can see where it appears in the next section there. This M is new. This is the Shipman Garden report. This is something that we talked about.
Do you want me to keep scrolling down?
Unless there, I mean, I invite the board to make comments, but I believe this to be consistent with what the board has expressed. That's all. But, you know, obviously, I mean, we're trying to whittle it down to a few or no issues. So if there are issues with the idea behind the Shipman Garden plan, you know, you can raise them now, or we'll have another opportunity. But that's just a concept that was not previously in here. Now, if you look at the final plans, so this has this notion of final plans and final construction plans. Now, I was expecting final plans to be final plans, so that we're working with two different, I don't know what final plans are if they're not final construction plans, was point one. But also, I don't think the board needs to approve the final plans. The board, I think it's more appropriate for the board to designate the building inspector to approve the final plans, so long as they are consistent with the approved plans, capital A, capital P.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so that's in that next paragraph down at the bottom under 9.
Yep.
it should say the board's agent, I guess, if they're found to be consistent with the requirements of this comprehensive permit.
Yep.
So again, just trying to limit the executive function of this board, given that it's a, quasi judicial body. So that's what those edits are all about.
Yep.
Now, this is where prior to the issuance of the building permit, if you look at G, that's when the fully executed and recorded easement consistent with the requirements of paragraph C1 above. And this idea of final construction plans. Now, it could be that people are actually anticipating that the final plans are, I don't know, 100%, and the final construction plans is the bid set, but I don't know. Is it usual that people would do it that way?
The wording of that condition that refers to construction plans is from Sean.
Yeah, well.
If you want me to clarify it with him, I will.
Well, no, it's not Sean. I think the question for the design team is, are we going to have two separate final sets? So you could have, like in my world, we have 100% drawings, and we have a bid set, right? So if that's what we're talking about, then it's okay. But what I don't want to do is impose an affirmative burden on the applicant to produce a set of drawings that they weren't anticipating producing. And maybe the final construction plans are actually intended to be the final plans as referred to in this permit. So I think the question is for the applicant. So, because I don't know that it adds anything. The question would be, what's in the final construction plans that wouldn't be in the final plans? And it could be that there is something, but I don't know. So that's all. And then that would change a little bit of the way that this is presented, but I don't think that's a substantive, it shouldn't be it's not intended to be a substantive comment. It's just, I didn't know if we were asking for yet another set of drawings.
Do you want me to move on?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, and I struck the regularly scheduled board meeting. I don't think the board is planning on meeting on this comprehensive permit, unless we have to. Unless there's an enforcement action or a modification. Is that right?
That's fine.
Tim, do you expect to be presenting to the board on these?
No.
Yeah.
Plus, we meet on an as-needed basis. We're not regularly scheduled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like and I kind of assume that this is, it goes without saying, but maybe it needs to be said. If I get the regulatory agreement and I look at it and something is amiss, what is when Jeff, when you say like enforcement action or modification, like if I were to come to you and say like, hey, this is wrong, this isn't what's in the permit, that would be, I think, an occasion for.
Oh yeah, we're not prohibiting you from talking to the board, but this should be set up to be self-executing at the executive level. That's all, So
right, no, I think that's right. I think that's fine.
Yeah. And then the board's available as the permit granting authority, of course. Judy, the yellow highlights were already in there. I think you wanted to call attention to the fact that there's the potential to combine the I money with action, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was fine with me. I didn't want to lock in that Title V I fee. So they're going to pay what the then current fee schedule is. Whatever it is.
I was just working with the language that I got from the DPW director.
Yeah.
If you want different language from the DPW director, I'll have to chase it down.
No, I think fine. It's fine as, I mean, I'm fine with the way it's been edited.
Would this be an appropriate time, since we're talking about I and perhaps some of the sewer stuff that was so much sewer and drainage is so much part of the thing. As I was looking at this, it struck me that there was a lot of discussion concerning the manhole and sewer, I believe at the end of Meeting House Lane, across from Mr. Gallagher's property. And according to my notes, there was an agreement on the part of the applicant, Mr. Tamposi, that they would be agreeable to a condition that would result in some repairs or reconstructions of that particular manhole to try to resolve some of the issues. I think I may be incorrect, but the word invert seems to be stuck in my mind concerning that. I know invert and geometry, there was a lot of discussion concerning that. Such a condition didn't pop out at me on this. And it may be something that we need to have Sean deal with or check in with Tim, but I don't see it.
I can add it.
Yeah, I think you could say it's here because it's part of the record, but I think it does deserve, it does deserve specific mention because there was the flow study, right?
Yeah. That's the manhole with the flow study and all of the other issues associated with it.
Tim, maybe that's something that Chase Berkeley could write.
I will, I'll get that on his plate. Frank, I may want to briefly correspond with you just so I'm kind of, I know exactly, I know the issue obviously, but kind of exactly what the specific.
So just so the board is aware, I have a public hearing I have to join in 8 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to keep going?
Sure.
Now, this doesn't specifically, well, I don't know. What is the expectation on developing a website? I think it didn't specifically, maybe it does now with my addition. I think that will be, I don't know what's customary or Tim, what you're expecting. It's down a little bit at the bottom of page 20 there.
Are you requiring them to set up a website? I just had it as for example.
Yeah, no, I know. It says procedures for regular coordination. I don't know what's appropriate. I think that
Require them to
I
do
think the
a,
applicant was proposing to do that though.
right, but I don't think you want to impose a project website requirement in a comprehensive permit condition. I think what you want to say is they have to have regular procedures for communication with the neighborhood. And there'll be something, but I mean, I've never,
I mean, they did talk about it, and I think it'll end up being. I mean, there may be, you may want to I mean, I'm happy to work with the applicant on what the best sort of set of procedures is going to be. You know, and I think the EG is probably a good compromise on this.
that's what I had.
Because I mean, again, you know, we typically don't see projects as big as this. So, you know, we haven't had this in town of Milton. I mean, obviously, I've seen it elsewhere, you know, in the city of Boston, but
Oh, I've seen it too, sure. I mean, I see them. But it's not a requirement of the town for other kinds of projects. So again, it just becomes this issue of, are you asking these people to do something that your own bylaws don't require other developments to do? And I know you may think it is because it's a bigger project, but that's not what the law says. The law says you can't impose requirements on a comprehensive permit development that you don't already impose on others. So to me, this was a way to try to say we expect communication that's clear and consistent and timely, but as for how that gets done, I don't think that's really in the board's jurisdiction.
It seems to me that the EG is a reasonable compromise.
That's fine. I think that's okay. Let's do that. Judy, do you need to go?
Yeah, unfortunately I do, guys. I've got a public hearing on a master plan we finished for another town. So I appreciated your willingness to meet at 5. I know this is kind of an inconvenience for all of you.
Can we gain control of this or to continue the meeting or?
Yeah, well, Tim would have to share it because, I mean, it's your Zoom license, it's not mine. So someone just needs to be able to share it.
Judy, is this document on your desktop? Would you have to send it to me in order to continue?
I can do that as soon as I get out of screen share, yes. I need to remind everybody that you need to request an extension of the applicant to continue these deliberations because we're going to bump up against the 40-day limit under 40B. I think that if you need another couple of weeks, that's probably perfectly reasonable.
Okay.
So you might want to set a date for that. Maybe think, you know, the 15th or something that gets you through a couple of more Wednesdays. I think the applicant would be perfectly amenable to providing that extension.
Okay.
So someone's going to need to kind of administratively, I think, convey that request and then, you know, make sure you get the letter. I mean, I can obviously chase the letter, but someone needs to communicate that request to Jesse Schomer. I mean, I can do it. Tim can do it. I don't care, but somebody needs to do it.
I can do that.
Okay. So I'm going to not screen share anymore. And Tim, I will send you a link to this because it's really just the markup I got from Jeff. And I've kind of made a few notes along the way. So I will send that to you right now, but then I really have to get on this hearing. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Judy.
Thank you so much for being willing to meet at 5. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Talk to you later. Tim, I'll send this right now. Bye-bye.
Really very, very sheepish and embarrassed for using the term wing it, guys. I don't want to convey to you that we're not on top of things. We don't deal with things as big as this. So it's kind of, you know, not the most elaborate and elegant system that we have, but it works. That's kind of
Tim, I should have probably used the term informal system versus a formal systematized procedure.
Yeah, no.
My apologies for that.
Frank, not a problem. But you know, it's a small shop and a small operation, so we do need to kind of scale up our capacity and figure that kind of thing out. But I know people are going to be watching this in the future and think that I'm kind of a screw up. And I assure you that.
You know what,
No, they
Tim,
won't think
that,
that.
that I could tell you that there's three people sitting on this thing. Beverly would be the fourth, that would think that you're the furthest thing from a screw up.
All right, let me see if that email from Judy came in, and then we can continue this. So just sit tight.
While we're doing that, Frank, didn't you have some travel coming up?
I do.
Can you remind me what it is?
As soon as I remind myself. Yeah, the week of, I will be out of pocket, the 13th, 14th, and 15th.
Yeah. And I will be out of pocket December 18th to 28th. I'll be out of the country. Assuming that's allowed and possible.
I think we could probably get this finished in one more meeting.
So I've got Judy's document up. Can you remind me what section we were in? It was past D, correct?
We're right in there somewhere. Maybe around page 20.
Hold on a sec. I'm on a trackpad instead of a mouse, so we'll get there. All right, I'm going to share my screen and okay, we're in D1.
Yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have a hard stop at 6:50 p.m.
Okay.
Where were we this far? I'm on
Yeah,
page 22.
no, you're good. You're good. You're good. You were moving. I mean, most of those changes are just mostly correcting definitions and capitalized terms and things like that, Tim. The yellow highlighted was, I think, from the original. I don't know that there needs to be any.
Yeah, this was the language that you asked me to draw
Yeah.
up about consistency with the 138 plan.
Yeah. Then this is language about the school buses, and the numbering's followed up there, you can see, but so there's three things happening here. One is the school bus construction. The second is to work with the T to provide, use their best efforts to work with the T to provide a designated bus stop. And then the third is the TDM program. Now that's something that Jeff Dirk suggested. We didn't talk about much, but I do think there needs to be an affirmative duty to try to drive mode share to the extent possible. Understood there's limited things you can do here, but that was part of the record. If people don't think so, I'm happy to talk about it, but I know that was part of Jeff Dirk's recommendation.
Jeff, do we want to add the school department into the E6 manner approved by the DPW director?
Yeah, I was just thinking about infrastructure. We've been so focused on that wall, that's good. That's good. That's a good add, if that makes sense. Whatever the right, I'm not, I would pretend to be expert in town procedure,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly. I know we always include them on these conversations, so we'll.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to play around a little bit with this to get the formatting to be what it needs to be, because it's annoying and I don't want to let it go. And I'm gonna stop doing that because
yeah, that's what happened to me. So
So let's just make a note to figure that out.
So here I struck this fee schedule, it's whatever it is, it is. I figured it's okay to have it earlier to give you an indication of what it is now, but here I didn't think it needed to be repeated, that's all.
I'm writing a note to fix the section E formatting.
This could be the place where we could add the point about the flow study and addressing the manhole at the bottom, because this is a specific section on the utilities, It probably belongs in G.
Should I, well, so I'm gonna get language from Chase on that, and so I'll make a little comment here just to say, this is where it's gonna go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this also where we would put in the requirement to have an inspection, a construction inspector for the build out of the stormwater system?
Yes.
Do we have language like that? Do we need that?
I'll look at it, to Tim. I don't know specifically, but that was definitely committed to, so,
It was committed to, I don't know if it ever made it into the plans.
yeah.
I wonder if that's it.
Yeah, I don't know when the comprehensive permit, see, it says shall expire 3 years from the date that it becomes final. I don't know what that is. Is that the date that we sign it?
We can look up this reference.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could have done that. I just, and I'm sure people who do this regularly know that off the top of their head. I just didn't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it into my browser just so I remember it.
You're
And
good.
we can figure that back out. There's a lot of, it goes down to the clerk's office, but then there's an appeal period, and if someone else appeals, I know that there's different kind of, the eligibility of the units, it plays into that, but we can definitely kind of clarify that and figure that out.
No, we should talk about I3. So it kind of like Frank's point about the flow study. I added this commitment, this statement that not every single commitment that was made is in this comprehensive permit. And to the extent that we missed one, if it's part of the record, it is a condition of the project, as if it were stated here. So otherwise you'd need to read the entire record and list each and every commitment that was made. Now, I know that the vast majority of the commitments that were made are here because the vast majority of the commitments were incorporated into the approved plans, but I don't know. So that's why I added this. Good idea or a really bad idea?
I just wonder how, I mean, so I guess if someone produces, video from minute 57 of session number 24,
Right.
I don't know, I feel a little adrift without Judy here. Judy's done 100 of these. I've only done 2. So,
Yep.
It seemed a little onerous,
Yep.
given the number of hearings that we had. And also sort of, in my mind, things were committed to and then plans changed altogether. Right? There was sort of a layering of ideas.
Yep, that
Oh.
happened. Yep.
I also think both the applicant and the stakeholders should be allowed to have some faith in the 4 corners of the document.
Yep.
And while I understand that this is akin to a savings clause, if you will,
Yeah.
it just, it inserts a level of uncertainty into the permit where we spent a lot of time trying to insert certainty.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. If that's the pleasure of the board, then that second sentence should come out.
I mean, it would be different to say if, if they've made a commitment sort of above and beyond this that they would like to fulfill.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
They're-
Okay.
It's permissible.
Plus,
Right.
I'm sorry, Giselle, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead.
You know what, my impression is that, at least according to my notes, when there was a commitment made by the applicant, I have like a big exclamation point circled on it. And it just seems to me that we've included within the doc every one of the major commitments that I can recall.
Yeah, I have that same list and I agree with that. The only one that I couldn't find was groundwater mounding. But that's mostly because I'm not 100% sure I understand what groundwater mounding is. And I think I stated that at the time. So my note to myself on that point was to just confirm that the groundwater mounding requirement is built into here as part of the on-site wastewater plans, for example, So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
okay. All right. You're running up against.
Yeah. Can I just mention sort of out of order, something that I had mentioned just before the hearing closed, but I'm not sure it's in here. The health department's recommendation about sort of no smoking or vaping inside the building or within 25 feet.
Hmm.
This is of personal interest to me because I once lived in a very smoky apartment building. It was very unpleasant.
Is there a town rule on that?
I don't know if there's, I don't know. I just know that was I think the recommendation of the health board, according to my notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I know I've talked to Carolyn about this, and I know the Board of Health has been talking about it. I don't know if they've ever come to a decision in terms of a townwide policy. So let me make a note to kind of track that down, and then we can,
Okay, well.
you're going to see that come up as an email on my screen. That's how you know that I'm writing notes to myself. You also may have seen that we just got a letter from the applicant agreeing to an extension to the 15th.
Oh, thank you.
So,
That's so-
yeah, they're right on top of things.
They're like lawyers, like listening in.
So this J11 is another a point I made earlier. When we talk about the town, unless the select board or the law requires another entity, we're really talking about the building inspector here as an actor. I think that's right, but
I think that's fine as just a way of clarifying. The the Board of Appeals, is staffed by the building inspector's office. He's got his hands on a lot of this stuff. So I think that's fine. I think he's gone through this with a lot of care to make sure that, as a practical matter, the folks that need to review certain things get it. But I think if there's any question, I think getting it to the building inspector is fine.
Yeah, okay. The rest of this, and I'm looking at the clock, the rest of this is, there's some standard forms, the list of the approved plans, and then the conditions, the waivers, I'm sorry. I had one comment on the waiver, which I think has been addressed, but I don't know that Giselle has had enough time with the waivers. I know you asked about this before. This was the subject of a hearing we had where we commented on a couple of the waivers, but really we didn't do much, didn't have many, the board collectively did not have many concerns with the waivers that were being requested. And in fact, most of this is confirming things that the body of the document already does. But given that it's 6:44, Frank's got a hard stop at 6:50, maybe what we could do is clean this up and give the board another opportunity to read through it. And then we could reconvene next Wednesday for the purposes of trying to finalize it. I don't know that we'll need another meeting. And the applicant has given us another week to make the filing, which it feels to me like, given where we are, there's a couple of pieces of homework here. You clean up the document, and I can go through that. We can meet next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, discuss these final matters, finalize the document, and have it filed by the 15th.
Mr. Chairman, given my schedule, I'm basically free the 6th, 7th, the evening of the 6th, 7th, and 8th. And just for the sake of caution, if you wanted schedule a meeting, the board, the 6th, the 6th, and then the potential one on the 8th or the 7th and the 8th, just for caution's sake, so that we're done, I'm certainly amenable to that.
Well, I don't want to.
I'm sorry, the
No, you
6th
go
is
ahead.
not available.
Yeah.
But the 7th and 8th are.
7th actually works better for me than the 8th.
Oh, I hope I'm right. What am I meeting? What? The 7th is Canton Avenue. Tuesday's at Canton Avenue.
Yeah,
Oh,
but they
yep, we're right.
continue.
Yep,
They continue
the
to the 14th. So
14th,
that's all.
correct. Yep. Thank you.
All right, so the
Yeah, the
pleasure of the
7th.
board is to continue this discussion until December 7th at 7 o'clock.
Mhm.
But Giselle, did you say that you can't meet on the 8th?
I can meet on the 8th. We have our litigation holiday party.
Okay, all right.
So
Well,
I
let's try to
certainly
not
can.
meet let's try to finish this on the 7th. Frank, I'm pretty confident we can do that.
All right.
All right.
I think we're this close. So
You too. I think I can get all my final comments in writing. The only thing I remembered about the waivers was an issue about sign approval. And I think that was resolved. So I'll double check.
Okay.
Signage, like how the sign, and we also, I think after that meeting, got plans for signage. So we had a better sense of what the direction the developer is going in. So I actually think I'm good with the document. So.
All right, so here's where we are. Let me wrap up. 6:40, I had 2 minutes. We're going to meet on December 7th at 7 o'clock. We've got the following homework. Tim's going to get back to us with respect to whether or not the town believes that the annual compliance report is a helpful and reasonable requirement. That's the main homework. I think I need somebody to satisfy myself that the groundwater monitoring has been addressed. we've got to satisfy ourselves that the flow study and the construction inspector requirement for the infrastructure has been satisfied. And we need to decide where we end up on the smoking and vaping. But I think that's somewhat a function of where the Board of Health is with respect to the town. And we could, if the town has a rule on that, what I'd rather do is leverage that rule specifically, you know? So I think that's the extent of the homework, other than, you know, a read through of the document. It probably merits that. It's good. I mean, I really was happy with Judy's draft, I'll say.
Can you repeat? So I'm doing the compliance report. We're getting some clarity on that. The
Yeah.
groundwater mounding issue. What was the third one?
It could be on the groundwater monitoring. It could be that it's addressed in the infrastructure plans. The third is the language on the flow study.
The manhole issue.
Yeah.
The
Right,
manhole.
That's really an offsite infrastructure requirement to which the applicant committed.
Yeah.
Actually work. The language on the construction inspector as well. And then smoking and vaping. Now, Tim, are you gonna have to send this back to Judy because she owns this document?
Yeah, so I saved, and I'll save it again. I'm gonna just send it off to everybody right now as soon as this meeting closes, and then it'll be in Judy's hands. And then you know, in terms of the red line, I didn't, you know, I didn't accept or reject anything except if I was like explicitly like told to. So I don't know if someone wants to, whether it's Judy or Jeff or somebody, to go in and kind of clean the things up that are now accepted and stipulated and whatever.
I think Judy's done a great job of that, and I don't need, you know, I don't know that the board needs to do that. I think what would be good is to read it again, you know? So maybe just to turn this internally and people can read it, and then that will be an appropriate way for us to get ready for the 7th.
Okay. Stop sharing. We done?
Unless there's further business for the board tonight, we'll stand in recess until December 7th at 7 o'clock. Okay, we're adjourned.
Take care.
Thank you all. Bye now.
Thanks.